Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is an Asus VivoBook X202e, which is a portable notebook which has a relatively reasonable price. It has a list price of $599 and a street price of as low as $499 as of late December 2012. And it's a Windows 8 notebook with a touchscreen display. That makes it one of the cheapest notebooks available with Windows 8 and a touchscreen, and it's also a fairly portable model with an 11.6-inch display. Weighs about 2.9 pounds, measures less than an inch thick, and even has a fairly portable power adapter, which is something that you might need considering it has a non-removable battery. So let's take a quick look and see what you get here. On the bottom, one large panel. You can't upgrade the RAM even if you disassemble the laptop and take this case off because the RAM is soldered to the motherboard. But this model has a 500 gigabyte hard drive. If you want a larger hard drive or a faster hard drive or a solid state disk, you can take it apart and upgrade that way. Speakers are at the sides here, but where it sort of starts to tilt up, which means that when you place the laptop flat on the ground, the speakers are not right against the table or your lap, and so they sound reasonably good for laptop speakers. We've got HDMI, USB 3.0, USB 2.0, Ethernet, which you actually have to sort of open up here to make it full size, VGA, USB, SD card, and headset jack. In terms of size, it's, this is a budget model, so it's not quite as thin or light as, say, certain Ultrabooks. So what we're looking at here is a Samsung Series 9 Ultrabook, significantly thinner at about half an inch thick and lighter at about 2.5 pounds, larger with a 13.3-inch display, but also sells for about $800. So you can't necessarily expect quite the same thing. If we're looking at, say, some older portable notebooks from Asus, this is an Asus UL20A, which came out in 2009, has a 12.1-inch display, and you can see it's a little bit thicker, but it does have a removable battery. And even though it has a 12.1-inch screen, it's a little bit less wide, and part of the reason for that is that you've got a fairly large bezel around the screen because of the touchscreen display on the newer VivoBook model. And then to go really old school, here's a 2008 era Asus EPC X1000H, which is a netbook, which again has a removable battery and an upgrade panel here on the bottom, but an Intel Atom processor and a much thicker case. So just wanted to give a couple of comparisons there before we open this guy up and take a look at the inside, where we've got a touchscreen display, as I mentioned, a fairly wide bezel, and that's because it doesn't have the edge-to-edge glass that you might expect on more expensive notebooks. Instead, it's sort of got a little plastic rim around the sides here, and then this gives you enough space to do touchscreen gestures. Keyboard is a almost full-size keyboard. The keys seem a little bit small, but I didn't really have a lot of trouble typing, and when you press down hard on the sender, there's a little bit of flex, but it's really not too bad. Fairly large touchpad below the keyboard here, and it supports multi-touch gestures and swipe from the edge gestures like you would expect from a Windows 8 notebook. The sensitivity leaves a little bit to be desired. I noticed that from time to time my palm would touch this and move the cursor while I was typing. There don't seem to be a lot of options for adjusting the sensitivity in the settings, but overall it's not awful, and you can always plug in a USB mouse if you really wanted to. Take a look at the overall performance here. You can see that we've got support for touchscreen here. We can do your basic touch gestures, like bringing up your context menus, swiping to close programs, and you can also do a lot of those same things using touchpad gestures here. So if you don't want to use the touchscreen, you don't need to. One thing you might notice, though, is as I touch the touchscreen display, it wobbles. And that's something that I've seen, unfortunately, on a fair number. Well, I've only tested a couple of touchscreen laptops so far, but on the relatively inexpensive models like the HP NV4 Touch Smart and the Asus VivoBook X202e, it just seems a little silly that you would put a display on there that's meant to be touched, but when you do touch it, it wobbles. If you touch very carefully, maybe it won't, but I don't think that's the way most people really use this sort of thing. If you never use the touchscreen and you just sort of use the mouse and the keyboard, it's not too bad. You can see it doesn't really shake that much when I press on the keyboard, but that is something to be aware of. Now, the some higher-end models, like the Acer S7, have really sort of sturdy hinges that prevent it from wobbling very much. In terms of overall performance, I've found that the VivoBook X202e has an Intel Core i3 Ivy Bridge processor. It's not quite as fast as an i5 processor, but it's actually pretty close to comparable with a last generation Sandy Bridge Core i5 processor. So it's not quite as fast at transcoding audio or video files, but you get faster, higher performance 3D graphics and HD video performance. And so when you're doing basic things like surfing the web, it's going to perform pretty well. And you can see that, touchscreen gestures work pretty well. It's got a 1366 by 768 pixel display, loads pages quickly, runs Windows 8 style apps and classic Windows desktop style apps pretty well. And yeah, overall I don't really have a lot of complaints about performance other than the fact that the battery life really tops out at about 3.5 to 4 hours of battery life. So if you really wanted sort of all-day battery life, this laptop's not for you. But like I said, it is kind of nice that it has a relatively small and portable charging cable. I think the main thing that's nice about this is the price. If you're looking for a relatively portable notebook, you don't want to spend ultrabook-sized prices, then for $499 or maybe a little bit more than that, this is a pretty good option. If you need all-day battery life, it might not necessarily be for you. If you want a screen that doesn't wobble, it might not be for you. If you want a backlit keyboard or other premium features, it might not be for you. As you probably saw when I opened up the lid, it resumes from sleep almost instantly, and that's... There we go. And that's a nice feature, but because it has a hard drive as opposed to a solid-state disk, it does take a lot longer than some notebooks than some ultrabooks with solid-state disks to reboot. It looks like it's got a software update to install, so I can't really show you that now. But instead of 20 to 30 second boot times or even faster that we've seen from some notebooks, it really does take closer to a minute. And with the software update to install, it'll take longer than that. So not a bad notebook, pretty good for the price, especially if you're looking for something portable and affordable. But it's definitely not exactly an ultrabook replacement. If you're looking for a cheap notebook that lets you take advantage of the touchscreen features that you get with Windows 8, you could certainly do worse, though, than the VivoBook X202e.